one question, one follow-up. Hey,
Yeah, I'm sure you all remember that little vignette of Chrystia Freeland popping up in the middle of nowhere while Justin Trudeau was still Prime Minister. We'll be talking about Chrystia Freeland, who, of course, is a transport minister now, in a moment. But we're going to deal with how Pierre Poilievre talked about the viability and the desirability of Alberta independence at a town hall meeting in Alberta yesterday. So invite your comments today, and I'll be back momentarily to explain what the objective is today.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change, but we also need the resolve to resist. Yes, please like the broadcast. We really appreciate you giving us a thumbs up. Subscribe. We have to keep building subscriptions, and resubscribe if YouTube has done it to you. And that's always a possibility. So I'm going to tell you what the objective of today's program is. And I think it's important that we share that with you, because I'm not here to tell you whether or not separation or Alberta independence is a good or a bad thing. I can see both sides of it. And I've talked to people representing both sides. I don't live in Alberta, so it's not a decision I'm going to be making, at least right now. I can see the economic and the philosophical viability of an independent province. Of course, as I've said many times, I am a former member of the Canadian Armed Forces who proudly served my country. So it's a very difficult decision, and I think it's one that we need to discuss and debate. But I don't think at a town hall yesterday, and we'll get to this in a minute. I want to focus on Chrystia Freeland for a minute, if we can do that. And I really found this to be just incredible. But here's Chrystia Freeland demonstrating that it's all the same gang in Ottawa. You're going to get the same responses from government. No, we can't do anything about that. So here's Chrystia Freeland.
But you are the senior minister of you and Minister Robertson. Are you going to say in cabinet, number one, we should cancel this loan in favor of steel and aluminum and shipbuilding here in Canada, yes or no?
I have been very clear in my testimony today before the committee, in the House of Commons, and in all my opportunities to speak formally about this, that I am disappointed by this procurement. And in fact, I think there is widespread disappointment across Canada.
Here's a very telling picture. This is Chrystia Freeland hobnobbing with the UniParty, honored to host premiers, ministers, senators, and MPs in my backyard for a barbecue last night to celebrate what we have accomplished on free trade in Canada. What have you accomplished? And to build momentum to get the job done. It's wonderful to work together on free trade, labor, mobility, and building major projects here in Canada. We're building a stronger Canada for everyone. What a lot of vacuous rhetoric. But here's Doug Ford, there's Jean Chrétien. They're all in the game together. If you doubt there's a UniParty, here it is. Doug Ford wants to lead the Conservative Party of Canada because he thinks he's red Tory enough, he's faux conservative enough to bring it to victory. And that, of course, is a recipe for utter disaster. Now, I want to show this clip from last night. This is a town hall in the constituency of Battle River Crowfoot, which, of course, I've said numerous times, I don't think Pierre Poilievre can realistically lose. If he loses this, it's over in his political career, because this is a seat that the former MP elected just last April, Damien Currick, won with 83% of the vote. And numbers like that go back decades in this constituency. It's one of the most conservative ridings in the country, not just Alberta, anywhere. But it's also a riding where separatist sentiment is very high, very potent. There's no question about that. Now, Pierre Poilievre, we've seen he's going door to door, which he needs to do. He has to take this very seriously, because I'll say this very briefly, but when Pierre Poilievre first ran as a member of parliament in Nepean, a suburb of Ottawa, he was essentially a parachute candidate from Alberta. Now he's back in Alberta as a parachute candidate from Ontario. So it's a bit of an irony here. But if Pierre Poilievre doesn't win this, it's going to spell trouble for him. But here he is responding to a question from a member of the audience about why she and her family should choose Confederation, why they should stay in Canada. And frankly, I don't think Pierre Poilievre quite measured up to the task. And I'll tell you why. And we're not here to dump on Pierre Poilievre. Of course, he's running as a federalist. He's a federal party. This is a federal seat. This is a federal election, by-election. But he's obviously facing criticism. He's facing questions as he goes door to door from Albertans in this riding. I would suggest every second house, the occupants, if they come to the door, are asking him about, well, sell Confederation to me. Why should we stay in Canada? What's in it for Alberta? What's in it for me? So I'm sure he should have honed his answer a little better than what he comes out with. And I'll explain why I find this lacking.
I say to someone like me who was a young family and seeing more hope in the idea of the landlocked Western Canada than a never-ending Liberal government. The Liberal government owns the media, they run the universities, they have no shame or integrity. It feels like the game is rigged and that the East will always decide their fate. Why should Alberta and Saskatchewan stay?
That's a fair question. A very fair question. I frankly understand the frustration that people feel. The Liberals in Ottawa have told the West to pay up and shut up. They've attacked Alberta and Saskatchewan's biggest industries of agriculture, oil and gas, to name a few. And they have transferred massive wealth out of this region. So all of those concerns are legitimate. The question is, how do we deal with it? I believe the answer is in building alliances with like-minded Canadians across the country. So, for example, Alberta and Saskatchewan should lock arms with Newfoundland, which wants to repeal C-69 so that it can double its oil production. Newfoundland got off equalization by producing offshore oil. Now they want to do gas. We should lock arms with them to do that. You have the First Nations communities along with the British Columbia coast that want to build at least a half dozen LNG liquefaction plants to take Alberta's gas, liquefy it, put it on a ship, send it off to 2.5 billion customers in Asia, and get $14 for a million metric British thermal units instead of $3. That would bring home tens of billions of dollars of wealth for our people across the oil and gas regions of this country. We should team up with the people in the Greater Toronto area who want to see a massive crackdown on crime by toughening up the criminal justice system, because they're seeing the chaos in their streets. We should build alliances with, and you might be surprised to hear me say this, Quebec wants to have a smaller, weaker federal government so that they can have...
Quebec also wants its cake and eat it too. They want continued equalization payments from Alberta, billions of dollars, so it can continue to feed off the rest of the country. This is not a solution. There is no agreement here. There's no room for cooperation, because Quebec wants it their way, and they always will. And Poilievre knows this.
Have more autonomy over their provincial decisions. We should team up with them and say every province, including Alberta and Saskatchewan, should have more autonomy by having less power concentrated in Ottawa. Now you might say that sounds great, but when is it ever going to happen? Well, it did happen. You know, I described the nightmare that that happened under the Pierre Elliott Trudeau period. But a few years later, we got a conservative government that brought in free trade with the United States, which was a massive boon for the prairies, by the way. It got rid of the National Energy Program.
Okay, it did not get rid of the National Energy Program. Actually, Trudeau dropped that when he saw it was completely infeasible to continue. But I'll add in a minute.
Just privatized or got rid of about 25 different federal government agencies and bodies, reduced the size of the federal government in relative terms by roughly half, and in the period following.
Okay, so Poilievre is saying here there was some golden age in Canada for the West from 1984 to 2015 when Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister. What about those 10 years of Jean Chrétien, which the Conservative Party used to label as a decade of decline or a decade of despair? I know, I used to help write those talking points. Suddenly, those were great years for the West. And what about Brian Mulroney? Brian Mulroney created the Reform Party because he did not give a damn about Western Canada. That's what created the Reform Party. That's why Preston Manning jumped into the national scene and said the West wants in. Because Brian Mulroney didn't want the West in. Brian Mulroney always worked hard for Quebec. So this is nonsensical history. This is not even history. This is fairy tale. He's telling the crowd here, and it ain't good enough.
1984 to 2015, Alberta became pretty much the richest place anywhere in the world. And so it was by building alliances with other regions of the country that we were able to get what we wanted. And that was a great period. Like, look, in the period from the mid-'80s until 2015, when Harper left office, we built the oil sands. Incredible. The oil sands boom happened in that entire time. I think it was really liftoff in the 90s. So that's the incredible past we have. We have an incredible history with Canada, fighting and winning wars, building prosperity, settling the West. And I think we should build on that history by building alliances with other parts of the country that want the same things we do. Thank you.
Okay, so you got some applause for that. But what is it that Pierre Poilievre didn't talk about in that answer? Well, he didn't talk about the maritime provinces have 2.46 million people and 32 federal seats. Alberta has about double the population of the Maritimes and has 37 federal seats. Each voter in Atlantic Canada has 55% more representation than an Albertan. Pierre Poilievre doesn't talk about that. He doesn't want to talk about that. He thinks everything's going to be solved with a pipeline and just greater access to world markets with Alberta oil. Unfortunately, that's not it. How about taxation without representation? Look at this. 5.6 million in BC, 4.8 million in Alberta. How many senators? Newfoundland has 11, Nova Scotia has 11 MPs and 10 senators and gets 3.5 billion in equalization payments. Wow. And that is another example. And of course, Alberta has fewer senators than Nova Scotia or Quebec. And do you think Ontario and Quebec are going to want to continue to get their equalization payments? Pierre never talks about equalization payments. You know why? Because he knows it's an issue he can't really broach. Let's have a look at this here. And that's how a lot of Albertans feel right now, today. If an independent Alberta scares you, you are welcome to move back to Canada. Now, what is it Pierre Poilievre wasn't talking about in this answer? Poilievre says he wouldn't make any big changes to equalization program. Why do you think that is? Because Pierre Poilievre doesn't want to alienate voters in Quebec and Ontario. You see, it comes to a point in federal politics where you have to side with one province or another. And because there's more seats in Ontario and Quebec than there are in Alberta, he will, of course, side with Ontario and Quebec, just as every prime minister has, including the great Brian Mulroney. Even Stephen Harper, when it came down to it, he became quite auto-washed in the end. But Poilievre is not going to change equalization. And that, of course, is a sticking point with most Albertans today. Why should they be giving away billions of dollars to Quebec and Ontario? So when people talk about the UniParty, when they say, is there any difference between the Conservatives and the Liberals over some key issues? On this, there isn't. There's no difference. This is why Pierre Poilievre avoided talking about equalization. All you've got to do is open up the pipelines and everything will be fine for Alberta. That's not necessarily the case. Now, once again, I introduced this not to say that I want to see Pierre Poilievre defeated or to lose control of the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada, simply in the interest of honesty. You can't have it both ways. And this is why this is a difficult by-election for Pierre Poilievre, because there is so much pro-independent sentiment in that riding. Here's another point that Pierre Poilievre never wants to talk about. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says he is not proposing Canada exit the Paris Agreement. Donald Trump took the United States out of the Paris Agreement. Donald Trump took the United States out of the World Health Organization. Do you think Pierre Poilievre would do that? Pierre Poilievre said nothing about the WHO pandemic treaty. Absolutely nothing. Just like it never happened, like it never existed. Because why? Because he agrees with it and he doesn't want rank and file grassroots conservatives to know that, because they would be upset. So he doesn't talk about it. And this is incredibly important to note. If you're a federal leader, you're not going to make Alberta happy. And right now, Alberta remains very unhappy because we seem to have a federal government that never really changes. And that's the point I'm trying to make today. It never seems to change. Whether it's conservative or liberal, they all play by the same rules. They all go to Chrystia Freeland's parties. That's the state of politics in Canada. And you can say it's getting that way if it hasn't been that way for quite some time in the United States. Republicans and Democrats often act and behave and perform as the UniParty. In this country, conservatives and liberals, certainly when they went back to school for that 3-week period, I call it school because it's like they got their summer break. There was a UniParty going on during that period. But let's have a look at this. Look at the support for Alberta secession over the years. While optimistic that Pierre build pipelines in every direction, Poilievre may be beneficial in Alberta. Stephen Harper had very little success in Senate or equalization reform. With the 750 rule, it is simply stacked too high against us. Now let's have a look at the comments. And I really did find this interesting. Let's look at the comments. And this is, of course, Pierre Poilievre shared his video. Here's what I said. He's quite proud of what he said. And I'm not sure it really resonated as well as he thought. Here's Ryan Hemsley. Dude, Canada's lost. It's 51st state or bust. We've just lost. It is what it is. True North Woman. Hey, Pierre, if Canada separates you and other politicians use your political power, it doesn't work for you. So you are pushing the fantasy that Canada can be fixed. Maybe if you had won the last election, there was a small chance. Canada is broken beyond repair. It's free Alberta. How did that work out, Harper? It's time for Alberta independence. We are done trying to get in. Central and Eastern Canada wants nothing but our money. Here's my good friend Jeffrey Rath, of course, who's the chief counsel for the Alberta Prosperity Project. Go back to Ottawa. You aren't an Albertan, he says directly to Pierre Poilievre. Just joshing. Sorry, buddy, but you're too little and too late. I've watched your ascension for 10 years and was thoroughly convinced you would win the last election and be our prime minister. That you didn't win broke my heart because I took it as a litmus test of Canada's resilience. Freedom, honey, stop peddling false hope. The Liberals gerrymandered your Ontario riding, ensuring the CPC's defeat, following what was possibly the stupidest campaign, I think they mean campaign, not camping, in Canadian history. Elbows up. You're clinging to a fading dream in a paycheck, but the CPC will never form the government. Kelly with an I. We've tried to get representation and it doesn't work. It's separate or lose ourselves to the east over and over. And here's that picture. Bye-bye. Skills gap trainer. When nations fracture, civilizations fall. Because scaling up Canada, not breaking it apart, is the safest bet for our survival. Well, there's one voice in his favor. Karine Daly. I hope you win for the sake of Canada, but you will never be able to fix the problems that Canada has because of the balance of power being in Ontario and Quebec. It's how it's been set up. They won't give any of that up. And you were wrong totally. Secular man with Eastern Christian world. You didn't answer her question of why shouldn't the West separate? You said, here's what Alberta and Saskatchewan should be doing to make the best of our bad situation if you're not leaving. Very eloquent for extemporaneously. Alberta writes, but I don't agree. The country has only two political views, left and more left. Kel, no, you're a federalist, Poilievre. Your answer is weak. Derek T, hate to say it, but I feel deep down this country is lost. Rather go to the USA than to the creeps in the WEF. Big U. This is why you lose the leadership in the fall. Shmosov, you didn't answer the question. And no, he didn't answer the question. And here's that chart again. Taxation without representation. Alberta, not Canadian. You didn't answer the question. You list many things that could be done better, but the East voted for more of the same. If you cared about Alberta, you'd separate. Anyway, we could go on and on and on with these comments because I looked at most of them this morning and they're overwhelmingly negative. And I think that is where we are in this country right now. And once again, I'm not here to tell Alberta to separate or to tell Alberta to stay in Confederation. I strongly believe in Alberta's right to self-determination, in Alberta's right to decide whether it separates or stays in Confederation. That's Alberta's right. And Ontario is not going to take that away. The federal government's not going to take that away. I think the arguments right now in favor of separation are stronger than those in favor of federalism. Because, as I said, if that's the best that Pierre Poilievre can do after being on the road for the last couple of weeks, door knocking, listening to the views of Albertans, then I think he'd better recalculate. Because to simply say all we have to do is cooperate with Newfoundland and Labrador or Quebec and Ontario because we have so much in common with Toronto. No, Alberta has virtually nothing in common with Toronto. Toronto is a radical Marxist city, and it voted overwhelmingly for Marxist Carney. You know, I got comments yesterday from people. In fact, I got an email from one woman who said, Mark Carney's a communist. Just call him that. Well, I'm not sure if he's a communist or a fascist at times, but I know he's truly not a populist or a Democrat or somebody who wants to fight for Canada Strong. He wants to fight for China. And that's exactly why Chrystia Freeland, when she was asked about the sale of this of the BC Ferry contract, the tender of the BC Ferry contract to China, she said, "Oh, I really am upset about it, but I'm not going to do anything about it because they're all in this together." Mark Carney wants to help China. Mark Carney has spent a career assisting China as being an enabler of China. That's what Mark Carney is all about. So don't be surprised when Mark Carney turns around and tells you, well, this might not be popular with Canadians, but we're going to do this anyway because I really like China. And that's the UniParty in Ottawa. It doesn't really want change. And this is what the battle for Alberta is all about. Albertans have to decide whether they can work effectively within Confederation to override equalization, to sell their oil on the world market on their terms, to stop the federal government from constantly interfering with environmental policies that are quite clearly insane and irrational. These are the challenges, and I hate to use that word, for anybody running as a federalist right now, as a conservative federalist in Alberta. You're going to come right up to this problem, and it's going to continue until there's a resolution to the problem, and we're not there to any degree. Now, I got another video to show you. I think this is a better example of Pierre Poilievre. But a lot of you watched yesterday's program with Mark Carney going to a gay pride parade in Vancouver and making an utter fool of himself. Embracing the half-nude guy and looking like an absolute idiot. And Mark Carney, of course, saying it's more important for the Prime Minister to be seen at a gay pride parade than it is to be negotiating with the United States. And I haven't heard Pierre Poilievre say much about this issue at all. He finally was asked about digital currency, and I think his answer was quite good. We played that the other day, saying, no, I'm opposed to digital currency. Realizing, of course, that people in Alberta are very interested in digital currency. They're very opposed to digital currency. They know what it's all about. They know it's about the federal government imposing more control on their lives, controlling what they spend their money on, penalizing them for buying the wrong things. Albertans know that. Throughout the whole election campaign, the Conservative Party communications team said, don't talk about the World Economic Forum. Don't talk about digital currency. Don't talk about Klaus Schwab and those other people. Just talk about 2 or 3 talking points. And don't talk about things that really are important. Now, here's Pierre Poilievre talking about the state of Canada today.
I really like the people out here in East Central Alberta. We're having a lot of fun just out for a little bite to eat Smitty's with Cruz and Anna, and really enjoyed the ranchers, the farmers, the oil workers, everyone. They've been so friendly and kind, such good people. Where else would you find a guy walk up to you in the middle of a parking lot and offer you a big sack of beef jerky? Very generous in spirit. The thing I admire the most, though, is the ability of people to withstand hardship without any complaining. I was at a restaurant, I think it was yesterday noon in Stettler, and there was a wonderful waitress there, and she said she's a full-time teacher, she's a waitress, and she helps her family with both their ranch and their farm. She does all that. I said, geez, you must be tired. She said, no, this is what we do. We work hard, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, at least, and that's what I do. She said, but I'm kind of surprised because it used to be I'd be able to save up $1,000 a month or more doing all that work, and now it just vanishes into thin air. And that's what I see everywhere, people telling me that they're working harder and harder, and their money just evaporates. And frankly, it's not an accident. Our government is printing cash like crazy to fund its out-of-control spending. More money, chasing fewer goods equals higher prices. What I want to do is reverse that equation. Let's grow more food, produce more energy and build more homes while printing less money. So make more, print less. That way you have the dollars would then go further because you'd have more goods to buy rather than just more dollars to bid them up. And to do that, you're going to need to cut back on the spending in the federal government. We need to cut bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid, corporate welfare, handouts to phony, fraudulent refugee claimants, and other wasted money that goes out the door every single day. Once you stop wasting the money, you don't have to print it anymore. You can lower the taxes, the debt, the inflation, and make this a country where hard work pays off. And that's three ways. One, you remove the three ways. One, you remove the red tape so that people can make more. Two, you lower the taxes so that they keep more. And three, you bring down inflation so that what they keep lasts longer and goes further. That's the way you allow that incredible waitress in the Stettler who works 3 jobs actually get ahead and get the incredible quality of life that she's worked so hard for. Anyway, these are all great lessons that you pick up when you're traveling the highways and byways, the farms and ranches, the small businesses, and so much more in East Central Alberta, Battle River, Crowfoot. What a wonderful place it is, and what a privilege it is for me to spend so much time with these amazing people. Hope you're having a great long weekend.
Okay, that was, I think, quite effective. I think, he's enunciating policies that make sense here. And I just wanted to share, I'm trying to find this for you. Sorry for the delay. I've got to, this popped up over the last couple of days, and I'm just trying to find my, oh, I got to get rid of one. Just hold on, folks. We're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there. Where is it? Because a lot of people have been misidentifying this as a good thing. And it's, of course, there's a petition in front of Parliament drafted by a Liberal MP that would effectively outlaw or criminalize lying. And I find this fascinating. It's not letting me share this with you today, and I don't know why. Let's hold it now. I'm going to try again here. Bear with me. I'll find it. Anyway, there's a petition before Parliament right now by a Liberal MP saying that politicians lying should be criminalized. And a lot of people I see on YouTube are saying, well, that's a great thing, but the Liberals will never agree to that. Of course they will. This is just another shot at disinformation and misinformation. That's all this is. The Liberals will decide what lying is. They won't be guilty of lying. No, absolutely not. And you know where this is going to go. This is going to be the usual nonsense of Liberals deciding who's guilty and who's innocent. They do this to us all the time. And I think, if Canadians are going to fall for this one again, it's absolute insanity. I'll be back in a moment with some concluding remarks. Yes, please have a look at the story. Here's that story from Blacklock's reporter. I promised you. Petition to criminalize lying. And like I said, some YouTubers are not getting the point here. This is not a good thing to criminalize lying, because lying is an extremely subjective word. And leave it up to the Liberals, and everybody else but them is lying. And you know that's going to be the case with this. Thank you for watching today. I really appreciate your support. Share this broadcast with your friends and family. Let's beat the YouTube censorship. And like I say, it's important to discuss the issues in an objective way, not to be a propagandist. You'll never see, I'm in no politician's pocket. I'm not a propagandist. I think it's important to objectively analyze what politicians, whether they be liberal or conservative, are saying, and to be honest in our appraisal and our assessment of that. Thanks for watching today. It's been a pleasure as always. I'll be back again tomorrow. You've been watching David Krayden stand on guard live from Ottawa. See you tomorrow.